Well, it's a beautiful fall morning. Harvest has begun, both corn and soybeans. And we're out in a field today of corn in southwest Iowa that just took off 248 bushels of grain per acre. And so when you think about that grain that comes off, as I'm looking at all the stover, all the residue left behind, what type of volume of residue is out here? In theory, it's about 44 pounds for every bushel of grain that gets removed in corn. 250 bushel corn, that's about 5,500 pounds per acre that we have to contend with the following season. You're on the ground today from Iowa with Rob Seco. I'm Todd Claussen. So let's talk about this residue and a concept of management regarding this residue. And we want to talk about residue digester. And the residue digester from Streamline Ag is residue release. Residue release is a host of 6 different bacterial species. They're all bacillus species. And consider what they do. They speed up the decomposition and the decay of these complex carbon structures. And you can hear me say complex carbon structure. It's your stalk, it's your root ball, it's your leaf tissue, it's all of the residue that your crop leaves behind because they're built with carbohydrate and they're built of millions and millions of cells. So why a residue digester? Because if we can speed up the decomposition, what happens to these complex carbon structures? They fragment into consumable sugars by the life of the soil. Because we feed the soil, we don't feed the plant. And so if there is consumable sugar, an energy source for the life in the soil, what happens next season? We'll get to that in just a second. So if we break down this residue, we're able to increase the seed bed preparation and have a better seed bed next spring. We can reduce 25 to 30% of the total dry weight of this residue using a residue digester. Now, if you reduce the weight of that residue out here, what happens? You can get a better seed bed preparation, you get better emergence, you get fewer skips, you get less hairpinning of residue down in your true V. You also have the opportunity to skip or eliminate even a tillage pass. And if you don't eliminate a tillage pass, it's also less wear and tear on your tillage equipment, on your horsepower, and particularly on your tires. Okay? Let's take this just a step further. So if residue release is able to break down these complex carbon structures and fragment them into consumable sugars, the life of the soil will become more robust, will become heavily populated, and what will happen then? You'll get quicker mineralization from the organic matter in your soil into inorganic nutrients that the plant then can take up and serve as a nutrient source for the subsequent or next year's growing season. And think about it like this. We are not replacing nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium pound for pound. What happens is if we can increase the decomposition of the residue this fall, it breaks down into consumable sugars that the microbes and macrobes of the soil then can ingest for their energy source. They increase the microbial activity and health of the entire soil system. Then you're able to break down organic matter into uptakeable nutrients for your crop. And instead of that mineralization taking place way out here on the backside in the latter part of July through the first part of September, we can move that window of available nutrients up into June, into early July, to whereby now that nutrient availability has an effect on the reproductive phases of your next year's crop. So residue release, a residue digester, breaks down the complex carbon structures into consumable sugars. You break down and you decay the residue that's out here. You create a better seed bed. You create a better opportunity to plant more seeds, become established plants. You have less wear and tear on tillage, less wear and tear on equipment, and you release minerals and nutrients earlier in the season. Think about a residue digester from Streamline Ag known as residue release on your crop. Residue this fall. You've been on the ground today in Iowa with Rob Seco. I'm Todd Claussen.